The 6 pre-adolescent girls, all friends and classmates, gathered around their phones as they eagerly downloaded a new social media app that was all the rage. It promised hours of entertainment, and the girls were excited to start playing. The app was a simple game that involved creating a virtual avatar and then completing various tasks to earn points. The more points you earned, the higher your rank, and the more rewards you could unlock. It seemed harmless enough, and the girls quickly became addicted. At first, the game was a fun way for the girls to bond and compete with each other. They spent hours chatting online, sharing tips and tricks, and strategizing ways to beat the game. It was all in good fun, and they couldn't get enough of it. But as the girls spent more time playing, they began to notice a darker side to the game. Some of the tasks they were asked to complete were questionable, and the rewards seemed to be getting increasingly sinister. It was as if the game was trying to draw them in, to keep them hooked at any cost. The girls also started to notice that the more they played, the more they became disconnected from reality. They spent less time with their families and friends, and more time staring at their screens. They were consumed by the game, and it was starting to take a toll on their mental health. Despite these warning signs, the girls couldn't stop playing. The thrill of the game was too addictive, and they were convinced that they could handle whatever it threw their way. They had no idea what they were getting themselves into, or the horrors that awaited them. Little did they know, the game was not just harmless entertainment, but a gateway to a world of darkness and terror. And as they continued to play, they would soon discover that the game had a mind of its own, and it would stop at nothing to keep them trapped within its grasp. As the girls prepared to embark on a new level of the game, they had no idea that this moment would be the beginning of a nightmarish journey into the unknown. They had no idea that their addiction to social media would lead to a night of terror, and that they would have to fight for their very survival. As the girls continued to play the game, their addiction grew stronger. They spent every spare moment on their phones, completing tasks and competing with each other. But as the game's demands became more extreme, the girls' behavior began to change. One day, during a heated argument over the game, one of the girls lashed out and said something hurtful to another. It was a moment of cyberbullying that would have far-reaching consequences. At first, the girls tried to brush off the incident as just a silly argument, but things quickly escalated. The girl who had been hurt by the comment began to withdraw from the group, and rumors started to spread about what had happened. Soon, the entire school had heard about the incident, and the girl who had been bullied became the subject of vicious online attacks. The other girls tried to defend themselves, but their words only seemed to make things worse. As the bullying continued, the girls started to notice something strange happening within the game. The avatar of the girl who had been bullied began to act strangely, almost as if it had a mind of its own. At first, the girls thought it was just a glitch in the game, but as the avatar's behavior grew more erratic, they realized that something was seriously wrong. They tried to reach out to the girl, but she refused to respond. The other girls continued to play the game, but the atmosphere had changed. There was a sense of unease that hung over them, a feeling that they were being watched by something malevolent. And then, one night, as the girls were playing the game together, the avatar of the bullied girl suddenly appeared on their screens. It was no longer a simple virtual image but a grotesque caricature of the girl, twisted and distorted in a way that made them shudder. The avatar started to taunt them, spewing hateful messages and threatening to destroy them. The girls were horrified, but they couldn't tear their eyes away from the screen. As the night wore on, the avatar's attacks grew more intense, and the girls realized that they were no longer playing a game but trapped in a nightmare. They had no idea what was happening to them, but they knew one thing for sure: they were in grave danger. The girls' addiction to the game had taken a sinister turn. They were no longer playing for fun but for their very survival. The avatar of the bullied girl had become a malevolent force, stalking them within the game and threatening to destroy them. Despite their fear, the girls couldn't stop playing. They were addicted to the game, and they felt that they had no choice but to keep playing until they reached the end. But as they delved deeper into the game, they realized that there was no end in sight. The tasks they were asked to complete grew increasingly dangerous, and the rewards became more twisted. They were no longer playing for points, but for their lives. As they progressed through the game, the girls became more and more isolated from the outside world. They stopped going to school, stopped seeing their families and friends. The game had become their entire reality, and they were powerless to resist its hold. As the night wore on, the girls started to experience strange phenomena in their homes. Objects moved on their own, strange noises echoed through the halls. It was as if the avatar had found a way to enter the real world and was tormenting them in their own homes. But the girls refused to give up. They were determined to beat the game, no matter the cost. They huddled together, their phones in hand, and tried to come up with a plan. As they played, the avatar continued to taunt them, promising to reveal their deepest fears and secrets. The girls were terrified, but they knew that they couldn't give in. As the night wore on, the girls started to lose track of time. They had been playing for hours, maybe even days. Their bodies were exhausted, but their minds were consumed by the game. And then, suddenly, the game ended. The avatar disappeared, and the girls were left alone in their darkened rooms. They had no idea what had just happened, but they knew that they had survived something truly terrifying. The girls emerged from their homes, blinking in the bright sunlight. They looked at each other, realizing that they had been changed by the experience. They had faced their deepest fears and survived. But as they walked down the street, they noticed something strange. The other people on the street were staring at them, their eyes wide with fear. The girls looked at each other, realizing that something was horribly wrong. They had emerged from the game, but had they truly escaped its grasp? The girls were bewildered by the reactions of the people on the street. They tried to talk to them, but the people recoiled in horror, as if they were contagious. As they walked, the girls started to notice that the world around them was different. The streets were deserted, and the buildings were dark and abandoned. It was as if the world had been taken over by a malevolent force. The girls realized that their addiction to the game had blinded them to the true horror of what was happening. They had been so consumed by the game that they had failed to notice the world around them crumbling. As they walked, they noticed strange symbols etched into the walls of buildings and on the sidewalks. They had seen these symbols within the game, and they realized with a sickening feeling that they had brought the game into the real world. They had unleashed something dark and malevolent into the world, and they didn't know how to stop it. As they continued to walk, they heard strange whispers and eerie laughter. It was as if the game was still with them, haunting them even after they had stopped playing. The girls were terrified, but they knew that they had to face their fears. They had to find a way to stop the game and undo the damage they had caused. As they searched for answers, they stumbled upon an old abandoned building. It was the headquarters of the company that had created the game. The girls broke into the building, determined to find answers. As they walked through the darkened halls, they noticed strange symbols etched into the walls. It was as if the company had been involved in something dark and forbidden. As they delved deeper into the building, they discovered a room that was filled with computers and servers. It was the nerve center of the game, the place where all of the game's data was stored. The girls realized that this was the key to stopping the game. They hacked into the system and started to delete the game's code. But as they worked, they realized that they were not alone. The avatar of the bullied girl appeared on their screens, taunting them and threatening to destroy them. The girls knew that they had to act fast. With shaking hands, they continued to delete the code. The avatar grew more and more frantic, trying to stop them. But the girls were determined, and they didn't stop until every last line of code was deleted. And then, suddenly, the game was gone. The screens went blank, and the girls were left standing in the darkened room. They had done it. They had stopped the game. As they emerged from the building, the world around them began to change. The buildings lit up, and people started to emerge from their homes. It was as if the world was waking up from a nightmare. The girls looked at each other, realizing that they had been changed by the experience. They had faced their addiction and survived. But they knew that they would never forget the horror they had experienced. The girls emerged from the building, feeling exhausted and traumatized. They had just deleted the code to a social media game that had turned into a night of terror. As they stepped out into the bright sunlight, they realized that the world around them had changed. People were out on the streets, walking their dogs, and going about their daily routines. The girls were relieved to see that the world had returned to normal. However, they knew that they couldn't escape the consequences of their actions. They had been complicit in the creation of a game that had caused harm to countless people. The girls knew that they had to take responsibility for their actions and make amends. As they walked through the streets, they saw people looking at them with suspicion and fear. They knew that they had been responsible for the strange symbols and messages that had been appearing all over town. The girls realized that they had to come clean about what they had done. They went to the police station and confessed everything. They told the authorities about their addiction to the game, the cyberbullying they had engaged in, and their role in bringing the game into the real world. The police were skeptical at first, but the girls were persistent. They showed the police the evidence of the game, the symbols and messages they had created, and the code that they had deleted. The police were shocked and horrified by what they saw. They realized that the girls had stumbled upon something dark and dangerous, and they had the potential to cause real harm. The girls were charged with cyberbullying, vandalism, and breaking and entering. They knew that they had to face the consequences of their actions, but they were grateful for the opportunity to make amends. As they awaited trial, the girls went to therapy and tried to make sense of what had happened. They realized that their addiction to the game had clouded their judgment and led them down a dark path. They learned the importance of taking responsibility for their actions and the power of making amends. They apologized to the people they had hurt and tried to make things right. The girls also realized the importance of seeking help when they needed it. They vowed to never let their addiction to anything, whether it be social media or otherwise, consume them again. The trial was a difficult and emotional experience for the girls. They were forced to relive the horrors of that night and face the consequences of their actions. They pleaded guilty to their charges and were sentenced to community service, therapy, and probation. After the trial, the girls made a vow to help others who were struggling with addiction and cyberbullying. They wanted to turn their negative experience into a positive one and help prevent others from falling down the same path they did. They started a support group for people struggling with addiction to social media and online games. They shared their story and their experiences, hoping to inspire others to seek help when they needed it. The girls also started a campaign to raise awareness about the dangers of cyberbullying and the importance of treating others with kindness and respect. They knew that they had a responsibility to use their experience to make a positive impact on the world. As the girls continued on their journey of recovery and redemption, they knew that the horror of that night would stay with them forever. But they were determined to use their experience to help others and make a positive impact on the world. Months had passed since the night that the girls had deleted the code to the social media game that had turned into a night of terror. They had faced the consequences of their actions and were trying to move forward with their lives. However, something strange was happening. The girls began to experience strange occurrences that they couldn't explain. It started with small things, like objects moving on their own or strange noises in the middle of the night. At first, the girls brushed it off as their imaginations running wild. But as the incidents continued to escalate, they couldn't deny that something was amiss. They tried to rationalize the strange occurrences, but they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They started to see strange symbols and messages that reminded them of the game they had deleted. The girls began to suspect that they were being haunted by the game they had created. They tried to ignore it, but the haunting became more and more intense. They decided to seek the help of a paranormal investigator, hoping to put an end to the haunting once and for all. The investigator was skeptical at first, but as he began to investigate, he realized that there was something truly strange happening. He discovered that the game they had created had somehow manifested itself into the real world, and it was seeking revenge on the girls for deleting it. The game had become a vengeful entity, and it was tormenting the girls for their actions. The girls were horrified by the revelation. They had thought that deleting the code had put an end to the game, but it seemed that they had only made things worse. The paranormal investigator worked tirelessly to rid the girls of the haunting. He performed a series of rituals and cleansings, hoping to banish the entity once and for all. The girls were relieved when the haunting finally stopped. They knew that they had dodged a bullet and were grateful to the paranormal investigator for his help. However, the experience left a lasting impact on the girls. They realized that their actions had consequences, and they couldn't escape the past. They also learned the importance of seeking help when they needed it and taking responsibility for their actions. The haunting had taught them a valuable lesson, and they were determined to use their experience to help others. They shared their story with the world, hoping to raise awareness about the dangers of addiction and cyberbullying. The girls also started a campaign to raise awareness about the dangers of playing online games that could potentially turn into something more sinister. They wanted to prevent others from making the same mistakes they had. As the girls continued to move forward with their lives, they knew that they would never forget the horror of that night. However, they were determined to turn their negative experience into a positive one and use it to make a difference in the world. In the end, the haunting served as a reminder that actions have consequences, and we must take responsibility for our actions. It was a cautionary tale about the dangers of addiction and the importance of seeking help when we need it. The girls had learned these lessons the hard way, but they were grateful for the experience and the opportunity to make a positive impact on the world.